My name is Clarisse Rosaz Shariyf. Welcome to the World Voices Festival. We are broadcasting on Crowdcast, and we want you to be part of the conversation. The chat is open for your comments. PEN America staff will also be answering your questions in the chat throughout the event. We'll share information there as well about our participants. So if you have any questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and please, you can use it throughout. This event will be live captioned and translated into Catalan and French. Please see links in the chat for access. And we will provide periodic visual descriptions for low vision audience members. Right now, we are in a frame on the left side of the screen. We see branding for PEN America and the PEN World Voices Festival in the corners. And there's a chat with lots of comments on the side where people hopefully are telling us where they are watching from. Let's get started with the event. Today, we are honored to bring together three amazing writers, Yamen Manai, Jordi Nopca, and Kawai Strong Washburn, who will be in conversation about their latest works of fiction. Jordi Nopca is the author of 2 novels and a new debut short story collection, Come On Up, which is his first book of fiction to appear in English. Nopca is also an award-winning journalist and editor of the newspaper Ara. Yamen Manai is the author of the Ardent Swarm, originally published as La Main Ardent, and his first book to be translated into English. He has published 3 novels with the Tunisia-based Éditions Elisade. And finally, Kawai Strong Washburn is the author of Sharks in the Time of Saviors, which is his first novel. He just won this year the 2021 PEN Hemingway Award for debut novel. Congratulations again, Kawai. It was so wonderful to be able to confer this award to you this year at the award ceremony. So now, let's welcome our special guests and authors. Please check the chat for their full bios. Hello. So we will start by sharing our pronouns.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello. So let's start by sharing our pronouns and a brief visual description of ourselves before diving in. So I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a woman. I won't say my age. I have brown skin and big curly hair. I'm wearing a purple top today, and behind me, there is this lovely brick wall and books. I'm actually right now in one of our conference rooms in the office of PEN America in Soho, New York. Welcome, Kawai.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. My name is Kawai, and I use he, him pronouns. I have dark brown skin. I have short curly hair. I'm wearing a pink patterned shirt, pink and blue patterned shirt, and behind me, I have a white wall with a green plant and several pictures on it.
Great. Bienvenue, Yamen, à toi.
Hi, everybody. I'm Yamen Manai. I'm a man. I have a dark hair. I have headphones that makes me look like a pilot. And I have behind me blank walls with my books.
Great. Hola, Jordi.
Hola. Hi, everybody. It's a honor for me to be here. So thank you. I am Jordi Nopca. I am a cisgender Caucasian man from Europe. I have short and wavy dark brown hair. I wear round metallic glasses because if I didn't, I wouldn't see you. I also wear a blue shirt. And I am in the room where I usually write my short stories and novels. So it's a quite intimate place for me. And I'm a bit nervous for sharing it, but I'll do my best.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you today, to be in conversation. It's a fun part. I mean, typically, I don't get to be on the stage. I'd rather be behind the scenes and, you know, just organizing things. But from time to time, it's fun for me to just do something different and be in conversation with you. So we can be nervous together. So I wanted to say and start by saying that today's panel for me is the perfect example of what the World Voices Festival is about and what it means to bring Pan America's mission to life. As you may know, the festival was founded after the events of September 11, 2001, and the goal was to preserve and really nurture strong channels of dialogue between the United States and the rest of the world. So the festival has always been a special space, a community of writers that are American and also international writers. So this year, we find ourselves, I think, at a special moment. We might be seeing the world with different eyes. We might actually, hopefully, be more aware of what makes us human. And we learned this virus, COVID-19, didn't care about frontiers, didn't care about languages, didn't care about your skin color, your race, your ethnicity. We saw protests all over the world for human rights, for social justice. Protests and kind of social uprising were front and center, I think, in our lives for the past year all over the world. And so I wanted to start by asking you, what has this year been for you? What changed in your lives during the pandemic, during the lockdown? What didn't change? How did you make it? And we can start with Kawai.
Yeah, thank you for the question. There was a lot that changed for me and my family during the lockdown. I think one of the most significant things early on was suddenly all four of us, myself, my partner, and our two children, were confined just to our home together to try and have all of these roles as, you know, parents and children and partners, but at the same time have to be students and teachers at times for my partner and myself. All of those roles were all happening together in the same space with very little relief or support, you know. So having all of that happen in such a confined space was an incredibly difficult time until we got to a place where there were some childcare options that opened back up and we had the ability to kind of get a little bit of support and help. But up until that time, you know, we were just all isolated together. So I think that was a really challenging part of this. But I think in addition to that, I think there were so many things that we take for granted in terms of there's just sort of in a given day what we get to do, and all of those things disappeared as well. In particular, just being able to be in the same physical space as another person, that was all of a sudden something that couldn't happen. It felt very threatening to be in a close physical proximity to any other person. And so that was an incredible challenge as well, feeling that, having that taken away and realizing how that is like almost just like a basic human necessity to be able to be in a close physical proximity to other people and have that feel in some way non-threatening. So all of those things are thoughts I have.
Absolutely. No, thank you for saying this. And Yamen and Jordi, I mean, for me, my family is not in the US. And so all of a sudden, it was also very clear that they were going through the same thing as I was, but there was no chance that we would be together anytime soon. So I wonder how same question to you, Jordi, and then Yamen.
In my case, when lockdown started, I had a boy, a toddler, who was 1 year old. So it was quite a challenge to live with my partner and also with this little boy who was opening up to the world. But at the same time, he was locked down as us. And in Spain and in Catalonia, boys, children, couldn't go outdoors for 2 months. So my baby couldn't go out as each child for 2 months, and it was really a challenge for him and for us, because he became more and more nervous and maybe a bit aggressive, even though he's charming Evan. I remember those months something really strange, because at the same time I was trying to write. I was working as well from home. It was almost impossible to write anything. So my personal despair uh, usually is softened by my creativity. Let's say that when I write, I am psychologically better. So during those months and after the lockdown, I had to experience a creative crisis, and it was quite difficult for me. So that was kind of a sum up of my experience.
Thank you, Jordi. And Yamen, et toi?
So it was a very strange experience for me because I was by myself. I was not with my family, not with my daughter. They left just 2 days before that this lockdown was announced, and I was unable to catch them, and I lived 3 months by myself. It was the occasion for me because I was 40 also last year, and at this age you start thinking about uh, your position. And I mean, for me, I was trying to find myself between the generations. Am I in the past generation, or am I still young to be touched with this whole change that the world is knowing, and what is my part of the future that I how can I contribute, because I think I was amazed with everybody by this new situation, and it was a lot of times described in the literature or on the cinema, and we were unable to imagine our reaction uh, while this thing come to life, became true. And I asked myself, what else like prophecy literature and or cinema had already give us, and how much we can think about our future through this prism of literature. Mm.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's really. I'm so glad that you sharing this with us, because I think it's that's what it is for me. Is like how we were living the same situation, not in different countries, but all of a sudden having to also contend with who we are and our fears and our desires, and of course our families. I wanted to also ask a follow-up question about who you are by training and how it intersects with your writing. So Kawai, you are an engineer, software engineer, if I'm not mistaken. And Yamen, you're also an engineer. And Jordi, you come from a
Software
family of
engineer too.
scientists.
I come from a family of
Family of
scientists,
scientists, right? And
but
and
I
so go ahead.
but I think I disappointed my parents because I chose literature and I chose journalism, two ways of not being wealthy, but maybe being more happy. I don't know. I don't know.
But I'm so glad you said that, because I wanted you to talk about how you chose this very different path that your family wanted for you. And Yamen and Kawai, I mean, how does science um, and your expertise in this other field intersect with your writing? Does it inform your writing at all?
So it intersects with the experience of Georgie, but at the opposite. My parents are teachers in literature, and I said to myself, I will do science because science can bring some money and pay the bills. So I started. I choose this studies really
Mhm.
by interest. I don't regret it today because we are in in the bottom of the word future, I would say all this digital transformation or this software impacts in our life. So it's very interesting for me as a writer to be in that spot and to understand how this will impact us in early future. But literature for me, it's I would say it's my first love, and it's something that I can
Mm.
practice without interest. So I like writing and I like reading since I was a child, and I continued in this way, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm with you, and I'm glad to be with you.
That's amazing. Kawai, what about you?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of different jobs. So I'm a software engineer now, but for a while I had done other things as well. I'd been a teacher and I'd worked for a nonprofit. I studied policy at a graduate school, and so I also have a background in economics and finance, and have worked in roles in that capacity as well. So I think the intersection I find is, I've noticed that when my working life, I have to feel some sense of the work that I'm doing is for something bigger than just making money or for having just a job, and luckily we're at a moment that software can do it's involved in a lot of different fields and it informs a lot of different things. And so I've been lucky to find places where I can feel like the work that I'm doing as a software engineer is trying to make things, hopefully, to help improve the world.
Mhm.
And that, in that way, I think it corresponds with what I try to do in my writing, which especially most recently, I've tried to challenge myself to use literature as a space to imagine a better future, to imagine the sort of future that I want to see created, and to have that be a kind of, I don't know, a sign on the wall that people can look to for ideas about how the future will be. And I think that's one of the fun things you can do in both literature and in the world of engineering. You can kind of build things that point people towards a better future.
Yeah, no, thank you. And jump in, Jordi.
Yes, sorry. It's just one specification. I am a journalist. You may think that I can be focused in economy or maybe politics, but my goal is only to write about literature and writers. So I am a cultural journalist, and I would say that maybe my goal is to try to help sharing that literature I like, and that literature that is being published in Spain, in Catalan, in Spanish. So my work also has sometimes an altruistic vision, because you are not only writing about things that are equal to success. You are trying to change your vision and the vision of the people that are reading your newspaper. In my case, I work in a newspaper.
Thank you. Thank you. And actually, I had another question lined up, but let's stay on this topic on like the power of stories, right? And actually preparing for this panel, I came across something that you said, Yamen, in an interview. And you talked about how the role of books and the role of literature for you. So I'll read the quote, and then let's talk a little bit more about that, the power of stories and the power of storytelling. So Yamen, in your interview, you said books opened my mind to different cultures and made me understand the power of literature, namely how it tells us that there is more than joins us, that sets us apart, and that people share the same sense of love, justice, sadness, that we can see ourselves in others, and that there are more reasons to hold out one's hand that refuse to. I thought that was a powerful image, that, let's hold hands as opposed to just walk away. And so tell me more about the power of storytelling for you, Yamen.
When I was child, I was really amazed by my experience with books. I was in the Tunisia of the early 80s with no television or very short programs for children. with no other means of to entertain yourself apart playing football, soccer. But I had the chance, child, to have books in my environments, and I find in the books a lot of adventures that I was enabled to live because I am child, because I am uh, in a country that don't have where people don't have means for travel, for to spend holidays in other countries. So for me this was amazing to use the books as a passport and to go everywhere in the past and the future, in all the places of the globe. So for me, North African, I was really happy to see that an English writer or an American writer can make me feel like he wants where he want to drive me, for the emotion he want to give to me. I was able to feel uh, what he wants, and this make me think that that the human community is larger than the community that I'm sewing in my neighbor. We are all the same. We are all have the same expectation from a story. We want all a story uh, with we imagine when you start telling a story to somebody, he start imagining with you what it's going to happen, and there is a lot of unity that comes from that proposal that you make when you tell a story, and you can gather a lot of people and show them that they have a lot to share, and not a lot of reasons to fight.
Thank you, Yamen. And Jordi, I wonder, I mean, it's the power of your stories, or are you consciously trying to tell stories about contemporary Spain, contemporary Barcelona, trying to really get people to know these people who are living in the now, and they're facing daily, challenges that occur in their daily lives, and are you more focusing on the now present as opposed to either, looking way ahead in the future or looking in the past? So how does it work for you in your work, and especially in this short story collection?
Well, in the case of Common Up, I started writing it right after the beginning of the last economic crisis that had started in 2008. So more or less it was 2009. Catalonia and Spain were experiencing the first consequences of that economic and financial crisis. And then I started writing short stories about my entourage, I would say. So my family, my friends, people who were telling me some stories about their own lives, or maybe things that that had happened to some relatives. And it was kind of a matter that grew and grew, but not in only one direction, because I didn't want to focus only in the economic effects, but also in the psychological effects of that crisis, especially the intimate consequences. So how losing your job can have bad effects in your familiar life, can make you lose your partner. They can make you, of course, feel worse than before and enter a kind of depression. So those psychological features were really important. So my characters, they are not protagonists, I would say, of the big history, but instead of that, they are more like victims of that big system that is around them, and that sometimes challenges them. So I started in 2009. I was working in those stories for 5 years. I didn't have only one direction, but I would say that unluckily my grandfather died. That made an important change in my life, and it gave me a way to somehow, I would say, unite all those stories I had, writing another short story in which my grandfather appeared. So I would say that one of the effects of that economic and social crisis was the death of my grandfather, and that helped me to build up the final material that is included in this book.
Clarisse, your mic is muted.
Sorry, I muted myself because I felt I heard an echo. Thank you so much. You guys are. See, we can do this together.
I'm sorry, I think Kawai is also muted.
Yes, but I think he don't want to speak for the moment.
Okay.
He's a software engineer. He knows how it works.
Sorry.
We'll get it together. Thank you, Kawai, and thank you, Yamen, for helping me find the unmute button. I was going to say, Kawai, for you, this kind of, was there an agenda, at all behind, you telling this particular story now? And I know it took a long time for you to write this book, so it's over a decade, if I'm not mistaken. But in terms of like, what did you want to leave us with? What did you want that story to do for you in your book?
Yeah, so I think there were a few things that I was preoccupied with while I was writing it, and those were, at one level, the way that it felt to be in certain spaces and the contrast between them. So, for instance, parts of the continental United States and parts of the Hawaiian Islands that I grew up in. And in one case, we talk about just the natural world and the sort of environments I grew up in the islands, and what those felt like, and the way that they almost, to me, they almost feel like a soul. Like there's something more than just a space. There's a space and there's a character to it, and a feeling and a language of being in the islands that I wanted to express, but also to express the way that that's so different than what I experienced in the continental United States when I moved there. And so I wanted to explore those things almost at just a visceral level, but also to talk about, I wanted to push back against the sort of stereotypes that exist about the islands, and the way that people think of Hawaii as just this sort of tourist destination, and it's an exotic locale that is a package. It is seen as this like package for the consumption of an individual to come to the islands and have it be the way they want to experience the islands as an exotic vacation. And have that be this sort of thing they just consume in a one-way relationship, and then they leave. And then the stories that I felt like were permeating culture here in the United States about the islands were ones that aligned with that. And they completely ignore the reality of living in the islands and growing up there, and the ways in which you can experience very severe cultural and economic dislocation because of the relationship that exists between the islands and the sort of continental United States. So those were all things that I wanted to think about at the same time. And I also wanted to celebrate parts of the culture that I don't normally see reflected in a way that would require people to sort of come along for the ride. So that's both the language of the islands and the sort of the patois of the islands, right? We call it pidgin. A lot of the language is rendered that way. And there's no there's no translation. So the reader has to just sort of embrace, okay, this is a new language and I'm going to enter into that language. I'm going to do the work to come to the language and understand it and allow myself to be absorbed in it. And the same thing with things like hula, which is a part of the story as well, and the mythology of the islands. Those things are all there in a way that ask the reader to do a little bit of work, to come to the book, to come to the experience, rather than expecting it all to be translated and this assumption that, oh, you're not going to be familiar with the islands, let me explain them to you, because that would assume that the reader wasn't from the islands. For all I know, the person picking up the book is from Hawaii, and then they read that, and they don't need to be put in a place where it's expected nobody else understands their culture, right? So all of those things were floating around in my mind as I was writing it.
Yeah, fascinating. And I think this is why reading all your three works, I mean, for me, they were so connected and they were doing things that were a little bit the same, but I didn't know if it was just me because we put you together, or if it was really that dialogue within the works, which I think there is a dialogue between the works. I wonder, this is interesting that you talked about language and the idea of translating or not translating, something literally. And for both Jordi and Yamen, these books it's the first time that the English reading audience has access to your work. And Jordi, you write in Catalan, right? And so why is it important for you to write in Catalan? And then, what do you think? Do you think that as a reader, I can still connect with that specificity of the language that you write in?
Well, I would say that as a short answer, I'm writing in Catalan because it's my mother tongue. So I speak Catalan to my family, to my child, and almost to everyone who is willing to understand me in Catalan. But having said that, I would also say that in my book, at least in the Catalan or the Spanish version, which I also translated, I try to give the image of a bilingual society, which is something that I would say that from the outside and also from the English translation, which is really awesome, it cannot be fully reflected, I would say. So when I write in my Catalan, and sometimes in the dialogues especially, there are some Spanish words and some characters they express to each other in Spanish, so they change from one language to the other one. There are a lot of tourists in my book, and as Kawai said, I wanted to reflect Barcelona and Catalan society, and not only as a touristic resort, which sometimes we can believe that this is something that we are, and there is nothing left to say apart from that. If you are from Barcelona and if you are from my country. So this diversity was really important, and sometimes I would say that it may be criticized in my own culture, because this position is not shared by all of the writers from my generation and from previous generations. So the idea of trying to integrate Spanish, Catalan, maybe also English and French, and if I knew more languages, I think that they would be inside my book, because in my country and the country that I try to reflect in the book and also in my novels, changing languages is something natural. And I don't know if I can say any more to that.
No, this is wonderful. But I wanted to ask you a question, because I know that some people, have maybe different generations choose to write in Spanish versus Catalan. So, and Yamen, same question to you. I know that you publish your books in with a publisher that is Tunisia based, right? And that's a choice for you that you make. And so, for you, how do you navigate the literary landscape in France, right? And how does language play into that? Because you're writing in French, but you're publishing in Tunisia for a reason.
So in Tunisia, for decades, the place of the books were really mm, what you expect from people who are able to read. In Tunisia, a lot of people go to school because school is mandatory for children. But people don't read books. They only read in school, and once they go out from school, they have a problem with books. They don't read enough, and it was, I think, the same
Yeah,
case in the
yeah,
most
man.
of.
I'm sorry. You're cutting out a little bit. I think that we're losing some of your connection. Is your connection still okay? Internet connection?
Yeah,
Can
I
you
think
say
so.
something?
I
Go ahead.
do very well. Okay, so I was speaking about
Mhm.
the place of the book in Tunisia, and after decades of dictatorship, people lose their interest to books because the dictator that we had before the Arab Spring, before the revolution, don't have a strategy to make people love books because it's go against its interest as a dictator. So the most of the institution related to books in Tunisia are were not correctly financed, and from year to year, people lose their interest on the books. So as a writer, we have a struggle to make there to propose something to read for our people, because we have to feed their appetite for reading. We have to give answers for them, and that's why I publish with the Tunisian publisher, not the French publisher, because since we are in Tunisia, the book have the same price than a Tunisian book. But if I publish in Europe, unfortunately, the price will be a conversion of a price, and it will be too expensive for Tunisian readers. So this is why I wanted to work with a publisher, a Tunisian publisher, and also to say that we are able from those country to make a good work, a good artwork. My publisher, my Tunisian publisher, have some recent success that show us that people from the south, people from Africa, and all those misconsiderated countries and culture can propose to us something to read, something good. And this was very important for me to be the voice of my country in that way. um, I don't know if I answer everything, but maybe I will tell you that in Tunisia, uh, it's also a struggle to publish in French, because the mother tongue there is Arabic. The two of third of publication are in Arabic, one third only in French, and this publishing in another language is a kind of window kept open in Tunisia on the world, because it's very important for us to be bilingual, to have I would say a foot in our identity, and another foot to travel for the world. And the language is very important in that case. We need to keep the French alive, and we need also to speak better English than what I do. in this country, and to play our role, and to propose to the world the contribution that we are able to give.
Thank you, thank you. No, this is fascinating, and resonates so much between the three of you. Actually, Kawai, I want to just come back to you and ask you about. It's the same question, but within the U.S. and American context. I mean, your book it's your first published novel, and it was well received. It won the PEN Award, which we're happy about, but we're very, very proud of this. But I wonder, we know that right now in the publishing industry, they are asking themselves really tough questions about, how in the U.S. Publishing is a white industry in terms of who works within the industry, and then the asking authors and readers are really challenging the industry in terms of representation, in terms of diversity, in terms of equity, like who gets to be published, who gets paid what to get for their first book, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder if you don't mind speaking to your personal experience, your journey. How was it for you actually to enter that world of publishing as an author of color with a book that is also very specific and talks about, like you said, trying to kind of like reverse our understanding of Hawaii and how we typically represent it in literature?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I could talk about it certainly for a very long time. I think the first thing that's important to say up front is I've always recognized there were many other authors that came before me that had to do a lot more work before it was as possible as it was for me to be published, and that it was much, I believe for me, much easier than it was for the generation that came before me. And even farther back, if you go far enough back, there were women that had to publish under, pseudonyms, under male pseudonyms, so that they could even be published. And for quite some time, they had to do it that way before people even understood their true identity. And you start from that, and then you go through all the different writers that had to work so hard to represent different ethnic groups and things like that. And a lot of them broke down or really reduced the barriers before an author like myself even came along. And there were many other authors from the islands that did that as well, and that did some of the same things I do, where they wrote with the pidgin embedded in the language, and they wrote from a perspective of someone from the islands without any feeling of needing to explain or to target a specific audience that might be unfamiliar with the culture. There were a lot of other writers that did that before I did, and I'm sure, I wasn't there during the conversations they had to have with their publishers, but I'm sure they had to fight very hard for that. So for me, it was a lot easier, I think, than it could have been. And there were times where I had to have discussions where I would push back, different editors or people who would see my work would make suggestions about, well, maybe you could italicize this word or take this part out, or this writing seems to assume that the reader is familiar with the islands, and maybe we can adjust it some and make it easier for people that aren't familiar. You can explain things more. And I would push back against some of those things. But I was also very fortunate to have an agent, Duval Osteen from Araji Agency, that one of the reasons that she loved the book was that she recognized that specificity and the fact that it very much wanted to represent an authenticity of the culture that was missing. And so she championed it from that perspective. And so I think by the time it was even in the hands of editors, they were already the sorts of people that would be receptive to the work. So between the work that my agent did and to all the writers that came before me, I think there were many less barriers than there would have been.
That's great. That's great to hear. It might be a sign of progress. And so I have a few, let's pivot to a few questions from the audience. And there's one question about translation. And so I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't at least mention by name the wonderful translators that translated Yamen and Jordi's work. So for Jordi, Mara Faye Latham was the translator of Come On Up, and we also have a relationship through our PEN Awards and our Heim grants, and we have a strong, a grant program, and our awards program recognizes the amazing work of translators always. And for Yamen, Lara Vergniaud is your translator. So the audience question is about your relationship with your translators. Did you give them a lot of flexibility with the text, with the original text? And what is it like if you do such a thing? What is it like to read your work in translation in English? So Jordi, Yamen, you one start, and let's hear from both of you on that.
Please.
Go if you want.
Okay. So in the case of the English translation of Come On Up, I had some meetings, and I shared a lot of emails with Mara Faye Lidham. Some of them in English, some of them in Catalan, because she speaks a better Catalan than I speak English, even though I struggled to learn English from a wide range of professors, teachers, and tourists as well. Because as somebody from Barcelona, I have had to meet a lot of tourists and share my experiences with them. But with Mara, the way of working was that she shared her doubts, and I read her versions, and they were perfect. So I couldn't add anything to them. I would say that some of her commentaries have helped me to change the book in the second or third edition, because she was so precise that I realized that it was my fault in the original version in some sentences.
Wow.
So I have to thank her publicly as well, because she has been a great help, at least for me.
Great. Yamen?
So for me, the experience of the translation was very specific, because Lara was interested in the book before than my English publisher, Amazon Crossing, asked for the rights from my Tunisian publisher. She was interested by the book because she had a connection with Tunisia. Lara is born and raised in America, but his father is Tunisian. And he was in a trip in Tunisia with the summer where my book was published, and he took her a copy, and he offered her a copy because she wants to be aware of the publication in his father country. So every time he goes to Tunisia, he brought to her a lot of books published there. So it's for her a kind of being present in this cultural atmosphere. So she read the book, and she wanted to translate it, and she participated to a pen translation competition, and she won it by translating an expert from Lama Ardent. And then there was an interest from Amazon Publishing, and we are very happy and thankful to get our translation with them, because they offer a large visibility. They are distributed all over the world, thanks to the new technology also. So I think it was a good thing for the novel to be translated that way, with somebody who had a connection and a knowledge of the cultural atmosphere of the novel he will work on. So for Lara, it was an occasion to connect with her home country, to connect with some souvenirs, because there is a lot of things in the book that didn't change since we are child. Lara is from the same generation for me, and the main subject of the book is how revolution and the goodwill of people don't change things sometimes. And she, even if the book is about the revolution, but we can find a lot of things from the past that the revolution should have renew. But we found some of things of the past, some of the nostalgia of our childhood in this book, and that's make the connection of Lara with the book very strong. And the story was hers. I mean, she translated the way she wanted, and I think she was very professional, because I read it in English, and I found the beauty that I wanted to inject in my text. I found the same rhythm, the same sonority of the words, but I found also her own choices for few things. She consults me before putting them down. But for example, she changed the name of the main character because she thought that the name I give it to him in the French version was not very adapted to the American context. So she convinced me to change that. She convinced me to shorten one or two sentences, but that's all. I think that being a translator is a real great job, and I told you that I started to appreciate the word through translated story, translated books. So I think that it's a vital exercise for a culture to be translated and to translate books.
Thank you, Yamen. And so, what was the name of a city in Lama Ardent?
It was Le Don, like
Le Don.
the Don, and the Don in America, it sounds too much Don Corleone than Don than the Don
Yeah.
in the classic Spanish interpretation of it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this is why she convinced me to use CD instead of the Don, because maybe the imaginary of the people in America see a mafioso when he hears the Don.
Thank you. I'm glad I asked. I asked this question just for me, but I'm sure that the audience will appreciate that explanation as well. So I mean, unfortunately, we're coming towards the end of our event, and I just wanted to ask um, about, we have this wonderful, so we had this like social isolation lockdown where we talked about how we could not be in person, but then we also have this technology that allows us to, for example, for us at the festival, to still do what we're supposed to do, which is to bring writers from different parts of the country, different parts of the world together in conversation on the virtual stage this time around. I want to know if you feel like, looking a little bit ahead in the future, especially as, hopefully the vaccine and the pandemic is letting down a little bit, do you want to do more of this? And do you feel like you're able to connect to more readers, more communities using this technology of Crowdcast and Zoom and things like that? Or you cannot wait to not do another Zoom event and get on the plane and come to New York for an event? So I'm curious to see how you envisioning, the next year for you as a writer and your interactions with your readers.
I suppose I could start. I'll just quickly say that I think I would hope that in the future we see some combination of the two, because I think that it's having it be broadcasted here, at least here in the United States, it makes it more accessible to a lot of people that otherwise couldn't physically be at the event in person. And so a lot of events that I've been part of, we see people from all over the country tuning in, whereas they wouldn't have been able to see it previously because they didn't live in the city where it was happening. Or people that can't easily travel, even if they live in the same city, but getting from where they live to where the event is located can be very difficult or challenging. And so having a version of it that's online opens up accessibility. Obviously, it still requires you have an internet connection. So if you don't have an internet connection, it can still be a barrier. But at least in that way, there's a little bit more accessibility. But at the same time, I think that nothing replaces being in the same physical space with people and being able to interact with other writers and other readers just there in person. I think there's a certain, it will never be replicated perfectly over a digital medium. So.
But
Jordi, yes.
I think I totally agree with Kawai with what he said. I would only add maybe from a personal view or personal situation, because at least that's what I'm into right now. Having a child makes you a more homey person, no? In the way that I would totally love to have gone to New York and meet you all, but at the same time, I must say that I will be very happy when he comes back and I can have him with me, no? And maybe telling him a short story that I invent each night for him before he goes to sleep. And if I was in New York, I wouldn't be able to do it. And I am maybe more afraid of the world now than I was a year ago. And I'm not sure how will I react when I get on a plane. I am maybe not psychologically prepared, but I will do it. I know I will do it because I need to survive. But I'm not sure how will I react, and maybe this is my final statement. I'm living in an uncertain time, and I don't know how my life will be next year. I don't have any plans to publish a new novel because the last one was published a year ago. Unfortunately, just before the pandemic started, so it was kind of a disaster. So I'm just recovering from that big hit. And that's my situation right now.
Yeah, thank you, Jordi. What about you, Yamen?
I can't wait to have my full freedom back. I want to travel again, to see family, to see friends, and also to see readers and to be in festivals, because for young readers like us, I think it's very important to be in book exhibitions, because that's where we can meet the audience. We don't have a lot of novels on our curriculum vitae, so for us it's very important when we publish a book to go to book exhibitions, to go to libraries, to speak about them, to make them known from the public. So I can't wait for all this. But I'm like Kawai. I mean, I think that there is a lot of it was very easy to take the plane for the last decades, and maybe we didn't thought enough about the impact of those travels, and all those low cost tickets that you can buy. Maybe it's time also to reduce to our travels, unnecessary travels, since the technology is helpful to make it easier to meet virtually. I'm also eager to travel from my personal point of view, because I want to go elsewhere. I want to forget about myself, to meet new cultures, not only to travel as a writer, but as a human being, to under new skies with new cultures. So this part is really missing, and I'm eager to go to places I've never been before, and to meet people I've never met before, because I think this thing is the most inspiring thing that with books that I know.
Wonderful. I mean, this is a really wonderful way to end. I just want to selfishly, for the audience, make sure they have to pick up a copy of Come On Up. And Jordi, the next translation in English of the most recent work, I'm waiting for it. So I can't wait. I can't wait to read that English translation. But Ardent Swarm, please pick up this book as well. And Sharks in the Time of Saviors. You allowed me to travel, not just in time and not just to different countries, different cultures, but to really connect with people. I mean, I think that reading the stories and getting to know the characters and the protagonists in these three books allowed me to escape, from my kitchen where I have my home office. For the past year. So I thank you so much. I thank you for your words in the written word, but also I thank you for this conversation. It was a true honor to talk to you and to also present you to, I hope, a new set of readers. And I hope we get to host you virtually or in person in the next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And so I will just, in closing, just remind people that we have one more day of the festival. And so I hope that people will join the other events tonight and tomorrow. I want to do special thank yous for the Institute Ramon Lal for sponsoring this event, as well as Amazon Crossing for being such a great sponsor of the festival. Merci, merci, merci. Join us at the rest of the festival. Go to pen.org/festival to hear more. And that's it. Bye-bye.